Adaptation is necessary. We realize from a lot of studies that are looking into mitigation targets in the future that even if we want to stabilize climate change at non-dangerous levels, like 450 parts per million volume equivalent, it will be very difficult to achieve that unless emissions of greenhouse gases drop substantially in the near term. So even considering the fact that some mitigation might be achievable, there is still the great likelihood that climate change will happen in the very near future, in the shorter term, and in the longer term. So to deal with these changes and to deal with the effects that climate change will bring, we do need some form of adaptation within our societies. However, we know that there are not necessarily easy ways of achieving adaptation. In fact, adaptation might be inexpensive in some cases, but it might also be really costly in other cases. And there are potential barriers and limits to adaptation. Now, there can be physical, ecological barriers, and in some cases, these are actually called limits, intended as absolute limits beyond which irreversible change will occur. However, there are also other types of limits. For example, the IPCC Working Group 2 in the fourth assessment report talks about financial barriers, it talks about social, cultural barriers, and it talks about individual barriers as well. And the reason perhaps for which they use this different terminology is to indicate that some limits need not necessarily be absolute, but they can actually be subjective. They can actually be mutable. They don't necessarily need to be a fixed absolute limit in the sense that they can be overcome depending on how we view as individuals and as societies the notion of adaptation and what kind of issues that brings up in us trying to address it.